Good morning. Welcome to our Fuel the Classroom webinars this month. Aspire to be proud to partner with Microsoft to bring you these webinars. And we are a proud Microsoft Global Training Partner, and we look forward to hosting these free webinars all month and more coming after half term. And take a look at our website if you have any questions about upcoming webinars, and also stay tuned for more coming after half term. Before I get started today, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Dean, and I'm a learning technologist with Aspire to Be. I've been in education for over 20 years, and most recently I've taught in Wales, England, the United States, and Japan. Along that way, I've trained and helped and support PGC programs at UCL and Brunel University, as well as in the States. And I've had a lot of fun along that journey, learning from other teachers. And even today, I'm going to learn even more. I'm really excited about what we're going to see. So please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about using Microsoft in the classroom, or you just want to get some more information about anything that we've presented either today or any of the previous webinars, or maybe some webinars coming up and you have some questions about that. Please take a look at my contact details there on the right-hand side and jot them down. If you're watching this on a recording, you can go back and take a look at this whenever you need it, okay? Well, let's take a look at our agenda today. We've got quite a bit to go over. Now, normally I start with Microsoft and why now, but I'm going to actually do that after our presentations, because just like all educators, sometimes we're on a timeline. So I've got some of our educators that need to get back in the classroom. So we're going to actually start with number 2 and our webinars straight from our educators. And I'm just going to go over the topics that are going to be covered before I talk about the individuals. So the first presentation is going to be about the potential of bots in Microsoft Teams for health and social care simulation. So those of you that have used Microsoft Teams might not be aware of the bots that you can use. And when we say bots, it's basically an online support system if you have questions, and this is programmable. So for example, if the same recurring questions come over and over, you can have them respond in an automatic fashion. We'll go over that in just a bit with our presenter. And then secondly, we're going to have collaborating with students remotely via OneNote class notebook and breakout rooms, which is a really cool session, sounds like. And last, we're going to talk about Flipgrid, using Flipgrid for online collaboration and formative assessment. Now, Flipgrid and OneNote are topics that you're going to see a lot during the webinars, because there's so many uses for them, and it's so great to see all the unique ways that all the educators that come on and present share with us. So I'm really excited to see that as well. And then we're going to go into why Microsoft, why now? We're going to talk about 21st century skills, why it's so important, especially now in the current climate. Why now more than ever? We really need to have that access to hybrid learning. And then lastly, we're going to talk about our next steps on your Microsoft Innovative Educator journey, or your MIE journey. And then we're going to talk about Aspire Ed, our Aspire to Be learning platform, the MEC, the Microsoft Educator Center. And we're going to give your code to become a Microsoft Innovative Educator today. So stick around, we'll give you the code, and then talk about a way you can get even further vouchers for some upcoming special events. Okay, but let's go into introducing our presenters today. So we've got 3 presenters, okay, all of them from University of Central Lancashire, and we're very excited. Our first presenter today is Sam Pywell, lecturer in occupational therapy at the University of Central Lancashire, and I've put their Twitter tags there, and I've also put the Twitter tag for the school if you want to follow them. And then after that, we're going to talk to Jane Fitzgerald, who's our lecturer in health informatics at the school at the same university as well. And there's our Twitter tag. And then Nick Varley, lecturer in children's nursing. But we are going to begin with Sam. And Sam, are you there?
Hi, Dean.
How are you?
Doing really well, thanks. How are you?
Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to hand it over to you. And then as soon as you're done, I'll pop back in for a quick chat, and then we'll move on to our next presenter. Is that okay?
That's wonderful. Thanks very much.
Excellent. All right. Can't wait. Thanks, Sam.
Hi everyone, my name's Sam Pywell and I'm an occupational therapy lecturer with the University of Central Lancashire. I'm an MIE expert and I'm a key contributor within the DigiLearn sector as well. I've got my colleague here, Dr. Jones, who's going to be speaking in a little bit. We're both going to be speaking to you about the potential use of bots in Microsoft Teams for health and social care online simulation, particularly using TEL, which is technology enhanced learning. So I'm going to be sharing with you what we've done since the Sim Hospital. So we ran a simulation hospital in May this year, and this included students from occupational therapy, but staff from quite a wide range of backgrounds. And it's really as a result of that work that I've been going into the use of bots, particularly chatbots within online simulation. So just to reinforce that is this presentation, it's about running simulations remotely, so running them online and seeing what parts we can actually automate. So please forgive me, I'm just on a split screen at the moment, and I am now going to go to hopefully my next slide. There you go. So at UCLan, we've been using Microsoft Teams for the past 2 to 3 years now, but obviously with lockdown happening and with quite a surge really of clinical practice starting to use Microsoft Teams and this massive use of video calling, we are now actively looking at telehealth being delivered through Microsoft Teams because it has the video calling facility. So it's one of the 2 main platforms that we use to teach students on. And I think it's just really trying to prepare students for the realities of clinical practice. One thing I have looked at as well is something called Qbot. I don't know if you've heard of it, but a colleague at Microsoft pointed me towards Qbot in terms of the power of automation and the power of doing things slightly differently within Microsoft Teams. That's something certainly to have a look at. But if I just talk briefly about our simulated hospital. So these are some pictures of our staff and students. We have Che here, who's actually a social worker in real life. My colleague Mike, who's a physiotherapist. Our wonderful students, nursing colleagues, and occupational therapy staff as well. And all of these colleagues came together to help us deliver a simulated hospital in May. You can see the team that we set up here on the left and how we set up different wards. And we have different scenarios running at various points in the day. Now, what I did after the simulation was I went back in and looked at what happened and looked at how we could actually automate parts of the simulation. There were 28 members of staff involved in this, and the evaluation feedback that we got was really, really positive. The students and staff really liked it. They really wanted more. They said it was like feeling like being on a clinical shift. But there was feedback about staff cost, and understandably using 28 members of staff is not something that would be able to do every module all the time. It's really quite staff intensive what we ran, but I think a lot of people really wanted to be involved to see the potential of what we could do. Okay, so I've really gone away and reflected on that staff cost side of things, and the main question that came to me was what part of online simulation can actually be automated. It felt like looking back through the simulation, certain messages could be automated, and it might be possible to actually create simulated patients as chatbots. That was one of the first thoughts that I had. So I was looking at some of these message feeds. These are some of the examples of where I'd scheduled. It was about 10:30 in the morning, so it's a full day simulation. And about 10:30, I'd asked the staff to create a busy ward environment. So there was quite a fluid thing that happened, and staff started typing unscripted messages. So things like, is anyone there? I need a drink. Jane, who's presenting in a little bit, why hasn't anyone come to see me? I've not had breakfast, I need help. So students were asked to reply to all of the sim characters. And it really got me thinking. I wondered if I could release some staff time by deploying chatbots within channels for teamwork, for the purpose of teamwork, or for the purpose of one-to-one conversation. So actually a student conversing with a bot as if it was a one-to-one private chat. Okay, so this is what happens. I started to focus in on simulation and text in Microsoft Teams. I was looking at how to part automate it. And I do need to say a bit of a caveat here that I'm certainly not looking at removing the live element of simulation. So I still believe that we do need live facilitators. We still need live patients within the simulation. But this is to complement what was going on. I discussed my ideas with our senior learning technologist, Chris Melia, with professional colleagues as well, and with the Microsoft team. They've been incredibly supportive in trying to help me develop these ideas. Okay, so if you're doing this, what I'd recommend is just to consider what's the purpose of your bot. So the primary purpose of the chatbots that I was trying to create were to engage with students to do different tasks within a simulation. I was looking primarily at staff productivity because we're thinking about running larger scale simulations for the purpose of IPE. And really, through conversations with Dr. Jones, we'd looked at the pause between when a simulation finishes and when a debrief starts. So it was really, I needed to learn how to embed this within the simulation environment. And I looked at different purposes of bots as well. So where some harvest information, perhaps for the purpose of a personalized debrief or for the purpose of evaluation as well, and creating really quite high quality sim. And I think it really struck me that it was important to actually go back to this, increasing the quality of a simulation. And for us, for many health and social care courses, it's around sort of the realities of clinical practice. Even if you're doing an assessment or you're doing a task within clinical practice, you can still have a lot of other information going on around you that you need to deal with. Real people, real patients asking you things, and you still need to respond professionally and with good communication. Okay, so this is a very rough outline of my design process. I started to scribble down. I started to notice that there was actually a pattern to my scribbles. And what I was doing was I was trying to isolate key questions that I wanted the chatbot to address. So I really reflected on what students and staff were asking me, and wrote them down as the key questions. I'd then drawn up a little map and started to go outwards in terms of how I'd like to answer those as well. I needed to look at the direction, so whether I wanted any of the answers to actually loop backwards or to link anywhere within the chatbot, whether the chatbot was going to be harvesting any sort of information, and what information and where. And also how to end, because within the simulations, you don't always want a chatbot to give a score out of 5 and say, how have I done today? Has that answered your question? Because it's not then all of the chatbots, they're not like in a call center. It's not at the end of purchasing a product. This is actually a clinical conversation. So I think the end of your chatbot conversation just needs a little bit of thinking about as well. I'm just going to hand you over to my colleague, Dr. Jones, who is going to talk a little bit about our conversations on large-scale IPE and the potential for bots.
Thanks, Sam. So yes, I'm Abby Jones. I'm a GP, but I'm also clinical lead for interprofessional education at the School of Medicine. And one of the things that I've been creating with the help of Sam and a lot of other colleagues is a large frailty simulation event. So this is across 7 disciplines with OT, physio, pharmacy, physicians associates, social work, paramedics. We're all coming together with 370 students to do an online multidisciplinary team. And in that, they're supposed to create a joint management plan regarding a simulated patient with frailty. However, I mean, one of the things that I like about hearing about new tech, especially with the chatbots, is realizing, can this actually save us time? Can it save us cost? But more importantly, can it improve learning? And it's been stated enough times that the most amount of learning actually comes out of the debrief session rather than your actually simulated session. But what I've been finding when I'm creating my simulation sessions, the majority of our timetable space goes in actually doing the simulation sessions. And we don't have a lot of time for the debrief where the real learning occurs. So what Sam was telling me, and I was thinking, well, this could work. So we have literally just sort of 5 questions that I want our students to do in debrief, which pretty much is what went well, why, what didn't go well, why, and what you're going to do about it. But if you have 10 students in a group, just asking each one of those in turn those questions, 45 minutes will disappear like that without actually getting any kind of real discussion going. So when Sam was talking about chatbots, I thought, well, this could work quite nicely. If we got our students to do those questions within the chatbots, we're actually going to save time and then focus on the actual understanding why something might occur. And one of the other things is that if those chatbots can harvest that information in real time, then actually we can allow for a structured group debrief. So if your facilitator can see that the students are writing, well, what went well, we were able to delegate quite well, then we can spend the time focusing on, well, why did that happen? Or if something we didn't feel that we communicated very well, well, let's talk about that. And we can lead to a much more structured, focused debrief. So I think chatbots are really give us the ability to focus debrief, but focus our teaching and to allow us more time to spend on the important parts. Sam, I'm going to hand it back to you.
That's great. Thanks ever so much. Okay, so how have I started to explore? Well, I've been using Powerapps behind the scenes, and this little video, I hope you can see it. It's a video creating a chatbot in Powerapps. So it's just the hand-drawn map that I did. I've then gone into this program and connected it all up. So it's quite good to be able to use my own language. I'm not a coder, not a coder yet, but I don't think I'm going to be able to code. So this program's meant that I've been able to actually type in my language, my profession's language, without having to learn more of the background of how traditionally how chatbots are set up. So it's been really quite good to use. With creating this, it's possible to automate further. So I had reflected on the potential to actually automate flagging a facilitator. So say if a student was talking with the chatbot and they said, I'm really struggling, or I really don't get this concept, or say if they type something unprofessional, if it became a flag, we could actually automate and send a message directly to the facilitator. So there are different ways to use this. There we go. So I'm just going to give you a couple of brief examples of the different bots that I've created. One is of a reflective prompter. Forgive me, that's just zoomed on there, but the reflective prompter was where you just want students to reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, and that information, you don't have any intention of actually taking that and placing that in a spreadsheet. So it's just a prompt with students. This is another example. So this is what it looks like when it's actually deployed within Microsoft Teams. I've deployed it into my test team, and it looks as a private message between myself and the bot. So this is Bella. She says, please, can you pass a drink? I'm thirsty. So if you click yes, it then goes into, well, what are you doing? The nurse is questioning you. This patient's nil by mouth. You've got different ways of responding. I've just clicked, that's not very caring. And then it goes into shouting text. So you can program the scenario in many different ways, but that is another example. So another example is about repetitive prompters. So say if you get asked the same question over and over and over again, you may wish to give the students a chatbot which then repeats those answers. So we ran an OSCE over the summer with our master's students, and both themselves and the staff kept asking, because it was 4 stations, what each of the stations entailed. So that's the point where I created this, which is a reflective prompter. So this might be useful within a simulation. Debrief harvester. So that's a little bit of what my colleague Dr. Jones and I have been discussing. This is for the one of the IP scenarios that we're looking at, and if it's possible to actually create the chatbot where the information is then harvested out to an Excel spreadsheet for the purpose of teaching and learning. So you'd have a bird's eye view for the facilitator, a profession specific view for, say, for the occupational therapy profession, and then a team leader view as well. So this one's a little bit of a work in progress for us at the moment. Okay, this is within Sim Hospital 2. This is something that I'm planning at the moment. So for the next time we run the Sim Hospital, looking at bots that do multiple jobs. So bots that actually help students reflect, help prompt them, help actually signpost them within the sim. So say you need to go to ward A or ward B, and also to harvest some information for the purpose of a personalised debrief. Okay, I'm just going to whiz through a couple of these because I'm aware we're quite possibly running out of time now. This is where finally I've come to chatbot number 6, which is where the chatbot could actually be set up as a patient, relative or carer. They might have questions for students which help them then build up the clinical reasoning, and they could complement if you're building a simulation hospital, sim ward, sim home visit, many scenarios. So this is something that could be really quite useful, and this is where I've created George. So this is my final bot I want to show you today, and he is a chatbot that I deployed manually into Teams, into the main channel, and you can activate him by typing at George in the Teams channel. The team of students on that particular ward could then work together to communicate with George. And I've set questions for a purpose with him. So within the programming, I've asked things like, well, George is asking, forgive me, can somebody please help me to the toilet? So you've got a number of options. Sorry, I'm with another patient, leave it with me, no. And with this scenario, I've actually programmed George to get quite angry when he doesn't get the right answer. So I'm sorry that little video is not working there, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour of some of the ideas that I've had recently. A big thing to finish on is GDPR and ethics. I don't know if you've seen The Hack on Netflix, but data rights are human rights. I think that's a really powerful statement. And there is a bot code of development about doing no harm, but you need to know what information goes where. So you really need to be checking with your own GDPR and information governance unit. The future For us, it's about evaluating the deployment of different types of chatbots within online simulations and exploring the potential use of chatbots in other simulations, such as formal OSCEs and placements as well. I hope that's been interesting for you, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really interesting, and the use of automation in the classroom is so adaptable. So I'm going to have some questions for you later after Jane and Nikki go. I definitely want to get some more information from you because that was really great. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on quickly now to Jane Fitzgerald, our lecturer in health informatics at the University of Central Lancashire as well. Welcome, Jane. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you today?
Well, thank you for being here today. We're looking forward to your discussion or your presentation. And why don't you go ahead and get started? And just like with Sam, I'm going to come back, ask you a few questions later, because I got a feeling this one's going to be just as interesting as Sam's. And like I said, I'm always learning, so I'm going to definitely ask you lots of questions. So thank you for that in advance.
Ask away, ask away.
All right, thanks, Jane.
So collaborating with students remotely using OneNote Class Notebook and the breakout rooms, obviously our teaching has had to change so much as we've been forced to move from classroom to remote delivery from March this year. Now, my teaching style has always been very much workshop based, lots of group work for the students that they learn by doing, not just from being talked at. I was lucky in the fact that I'd already been using the class notebook in my classroom teaching. And so I just had to figure out how to adapt it to remote teaching and see how much could actually stay the same, even though the students and I could be in 50 different locations. Firstly, for those of you who've never used OneNote or the class notebook, I thought I should explain a little bit about what it is. And it is simply a digital notebook with seemingly endless sections and pages available. At least I haven't found a limit yet. The purple diagram here shows the 3 available sections. So you've got the content library, which is for class materials which are not editable by students. So you can put handouts and that sort of thing there. The collaboration space, which can be used by groups of pretty much any size, that I would suggest that anything over, say, 8 may well start to get a bit unwieldy. I think if you think of it like being in an actual classroom, because it works in exactly the same way. So if you're trying to work with groups of more than about 8, it can start to get quite difficult. And then, of course, you've got the student notebooks, which are accessible only by the student themselves and any teacher, instructor, member of the team. But there's an addition to this, and I always think of the main toolbar as being an additional section of it. And you can see here that I've put in a tab for module evaluation, and I ask my students to just put in a quick thought, whether they liked something, whether they didn't like something at the end of a session. And if it's there, they can answer that straight away. I've also put here a link to their Blackboard. So all the main materials for the unit sit within Blackboard, but they can just go backwards and forwards between the two. And then behind this other tab, which I unfortunately can't show you because it doesn't work that way, it's access to Flipgrid for this particular toolbar that I was using. So, we can use a wide range of tabs. I could add Wakelet in, for example. I know a lot of people use Wakelet. I use it myself for some of the work that I do. But what you're doing is you're keeping everything in one place. So the students don't have to leave the team space to access their work or their materials. And this is one of the reasons why I always recommend that if you're setting up a class notebook, you do it within Teams, because you can set it up outside of Teams, but then you can't import it. And at some point, you will want to bring all of that together. So you might as well be setting it up as one entity from the word go. From a teacher perspective, the class notebook helps you to keep everything in one place too. So as you can see here, I use the session dates as the sections. I then add an attendance register sheet for the students to complete, and that's just a simple table, along with a list of their collaboration groups, because they never remember which collaboration group they're in between sessions. I then create separate pages for their group work. So during this particular week, there was only one set of group work. If there was more than one set of group work, then it would be A2, A3, and so on and so forth. Now, this screenshot does highlight one issue here. This module is delivered by a number of different people, and another lecturer set their groups up in an entirely different way. Interestingly, where they've put the groups 1 to 6 here, the students couldn't use them because they are outside of the collaboration or that individual note space. Sorry, I've just moved on by accident. So what's important here is that you do actually talk to the people that you're going to be running the module with to just actually make a decision about exactly how it's going to be managed. So I use the collaboration space with the students in one of two ways. The first time I use a class notebook with them, I give them a template to complete, and they're always amazed when they realise that each member of the group can type into the table at the same time. This is far less scary than a blank page, which is the second type of activity. In the freestyle version, they can input anything they like around a stipulated subject. Here they were exploring the issues around bias in research. And what's lovely about the class notebook is that they can insert images, text, cartoons, links, and then it is always there for them to refer back to. So much easier than a whiteboard or flip chart in class, which is gone at the end of the session, unless you remember to take photos of the work and then remember to upload those photos somewhere the students can access them. The other useful thing here is that when the group is presenting their work, everyone can actually click into the space and see what the group is talking about. And this has worked well in the classroom too, when the relevant group space can be projected onto the large screen rather than people at the back having to peer at badly written flip chart paper or whiteboards. The other thing of note here is that you can see how cluttered the left-hand column is. So as I've explained before, it really is better to have it all planned out. The clutter is very difficult to manage. It confuses me, let alone the students. So taking a few minutes to plan out exactly how you're going to deliver and manage those sessions really does help. This is all great. The students are off collaborating away, but if you're anything like me, then you'll be wondering what they're actually up to. Is all the output really just from one person? What are their thought processes as they're working on the task? I've told them that they can always come back to the main meeting area with any questions, and I'll be there for the duration of the task. But what if they need some direction but don't know it? Microsoft are working on some formal breakout rooms at this very moment in time, but that new function isn't available yet. So in the meantime, I've just been using a simple additional preset meetings to which only the defined group members are invited. So you can see here that you've got the main session set up. All the students are invited to that, but alongside are separate meetings for the 6 different groups. Only they and I can enter that group meeting. And whilst they're talking there, they can also be actively working in the group space in the class notebook, and it all runs pretty much like a classroom really, especially if webcams are installed, because they can actually see each other as they're talking. This is a bit of a workaround at the moment, and it's not ideal that the students have to remember to leave their breakout group and come back to the main session at the prearranged time, but it does work pretty well enough for now. The other fine thing about the class notebook is the individual student section, which are these here. Whilst there's not yet a direct link between the teams and the Turnitin, and so the final submission still has to go back to Blackboard, I do give all of my student feedback via the class notebook now. You can see in this example that I've given the students a section for each of their assignments, and they can paste their work, their actual work, into the notebook, not just a link to the document, so that I can give them feedback on the work that they've submitted. And it's lovely that you can see it developing over the period of time, and they can constantly see that feedback, and it becomes much more of a two-way process, which the students certainly like. And that means there's no problem with version control. Once again, everything is in the same place. This is the only way that I give student feedback now, and I can tell you that it has halved my email inbox. I would recommend everybody to do it. Just to say, I've chosen not to use the assignment tab at the moment, because I thought it would just confuse the students. Until they can use that assignment tab and submit to turn it in, I thought it was better to keep it in more of a draft format, so that there was absolutely no confusion. There are, of course, some cons, some issues which we have to take into account here. We do assume that our students are very tech savvy these days, but then often not. A lot of my students are people who have come back to studying after a long time away, and they are absolutely not necessarily computer literate. So it's worth taking the time to explain exactly how Teams and the class notebook works. We also need to check in advance that our students have the right tech, not just a mobile phone, and then have a way of getting that tech to them if they need it. That's perfectly doable, but it does mean that you have to plan it in advance. Not being able to actually see the whole cohort in one place can make it tricky to manage large numbers, but generally the students have been very willing to work with us, and it's rare that there is any really inappropriate behaviour. The most difficult thing really is knowing whether every student is engaging or not. It's not obvious, and though I think the more anonymous nature of the collaborative space makes it feel less exposed than working face-to-face in front of others, it is something that I keep highlighting to Microsoft, that we need to have that ability for work in the collaborative space to be attributable to the relevant individuals. And then finally, you do have to remember, it's like a classroom. Students can still be late, they can mess around on their phones, and they can forget that their webcam is on. And sometimes that can be quite embarrassing. I did do a session recently with a young lady who was actually still in bed. So what I usually do is, when we're doing the main sessions, is to get them to turn their webcam off, because it's quite disruptive when you're trying to get something through to them really quite quickly so that they can go away and do their group work. I've had some great results and feedback. The students have all done really well, especially bearing in mind that none of these students knew each other before the module started. So you can see some of the feedback here. A few weeks back, I went into one of my completed modules looking for something, and found that a group of the students had actually set up a collaboration space for another module in mine, because there wasn't that space for their new module. So that just spoke volumes. My job is done here. I've converted a whole group of people. So thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. I could go on for hours, frankly, but this is a taster of what Teams and the class notebook and the breakout rooms can do for both you and your students. I'm going to be handing over to Nikki now, but I'll be happy to take questions at the end, and you're very welcome to contact me via email, Teams or Twitter if you'd like to follow up on any of this session.
Thank you, Jane. That was great. So, Jane, before I pass it off to Nikki, I just wanted to say that was really, really great. In terms of the class notebook and using it with Teams, I definitely have some questions for you later.
Yeah, sure.
But thank you for hanging around. Just to let you know, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to pass it on now to Nikki Varley, who's a lecturer in children's nursing at the same university, of course, of Central Lancashire. And Nikki, you're going to talk about Flipgrid, is that right?
I am indeed, yes.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to you, and like Jane and Sam and Abby, I'm really looking forward to this. So I'll hand it over now, not to take any of your time.
Thanks very much, Dean. Okay, so hi everybody, good morning. I feel like we're running a little bit behind now, so I'm going to fly through this presentation. So my name is Nikki Varley. I'm a lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, as you know. My background is children's nursing, so before I came into education, I worked on paediatric A&E, which I loved. I'm also an MIE expert and a DigiLearn champion. So how I teach at the moment, I teach in both pre and post registration nursing. And my experience of DigiLearning or digital learning was quite basic pre-lockdown, I've got to be honest. When COVID arrived, and as a university, we were told that we needed to teach online, I knew at that point that I had to up my game. So this is when I enrolled in the DigiLearn sector. So you can see a little icon on the screen there, and there's a sway link underneath. So I enrolled within this, down this pathway, and this is where I found Microsoft Educator Centre. So I enrolled on a few courses, and it kind of went from there. So back to the session though, because that's me gabbling on a little bit. I needed to make my sessions interesting, engaging, informative and inspiring, not just boring PowerPoint voiceovers, you know, Blackboard sessions. It needed to be something. If you haven't heard of Flipgrid already, please allow me to introduce it to you. Now, I love Flipgrid. You can probably tell by the tone of my voice, it really is a powerful, powerful tool. So let me just explain what Flipgrid is. So Flipgrid essentially is a website that allows teachers to create grids to facilitate video discussions. Each grid is like a message board where teachers compose questions called topics. And then basically what happens is the students can post a video response, and that appears in the title grid display. So why do I use Flipgrid? I use it because it's different, it gives a personal touch, it's great for online sessions, it's a great way of testing students' understanding, and it's really, really useful for formative assessment. It just makes a nice change from, like I said, Blackboard discussion boards. So yeah, I urge you to embrace it. So let's just have a look at how we would create a Flipgrid. Okay, so to create a Flipgrid, firstly, what you need to do is access the website. So you go into Google, type Flipgrid, and it comes back to, it will come up with this website here. So you can see in the right-hand corner, we've got educator sign up. So you would need to do that first. So you go to educator sign up and sign up. Next, what you want to do is create a topic for your community. So my community would be pre and post-reg nursing students. Whatever your community is, if you're a history teacher or whatever, your students would be your community. So what is a topic? A topic is a discussion prompt. It's a question, an experiment, an idea, or anything for your community to discuss. So what I'm going to do is just show you an example of one of my topics. So here you can see, it's quite a basic Flipgrid actually, but this is when I first got going. So my topic here is brain architecture. And you can see there's a video next to the questions that I've posed on the left-hand side. So the video is basically me introducing brain architecture and what I want my students to do. And then, as I've said before, I've posed some questions which are on the left-hand side. What you can't see at this point is the student responses underneath. Due to confidentiality, I can't put my student responses on because obviously there's pictures of them. Now I could have grayed them out, but I didn't want to go down that route. So the way that it would look is underneath where my picture is there, my video, there would be a white cross with the green background. So you can see the Flipgrid icon in the top left-hand corner. They would click on that and then they would add their response. Now, some students aren't okay with being videoed, and I had already thought of that. But what they can do is have a picture, and it can still video, but it will just do the audio. So they could just put a picture up, and that's just if they're uncomfortable. But it's good for students to have that option. Okay, so let's just have a look at setting access and sharing. So once you've created your topic, to share it with your community, it is really, really simple. So as an educator, you're in control of this, which is great. You have control of who has access to your topic. You can share it anywhere on your community, which already connects. So for instance, Microsoft Teams, Google Classrooms, you can actually put it on Blackboard as well. And you do this by sharing, by copying the embed code, and you can also get a special QR code as well. The good thing about this is that you can set the access as to whether the students can see each other's videos. So you can set it so they can, so they can't. You can put timers on their response. So if you want a long response, you could set it for 10 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It's really good. So what are the advantages of Flipgrid? It's quick, it's easy to set up, it looks great, it keeps the interest of your students because it's different. It's great for feedback on sessions that you've created, as I've already talked about. And it's really, really, really good for formative assessment. And I think that's really important in these times, actually, because we're also connecting via a visual potentially as well. So how have I utilised Flipgrid? So you can see I've utilised them before within Blackboard. I've also used them with Wakelet. So I'd create a Wakelet, which is another excellent tool. And incorporate grids into that session. So what I might do is ask them to read an article, ask them to watch a video, and then I want them to leave me a Flipgrid response, so a video response. The feedback for Flipgrid has been excellent. Students have really engaged and they like this format. And like I said, it's particularly useful in these times because we're so remote, aren't we, at the moment? It's good to be able to see faces and not just type in on Blackboard, you know, and that kind of thing. So obviously you can tell by the way I'm talking about it, I really, really rate it. Okay, so let's think about next steps for you. So if you haven't already enrolled on or signed up to Microsoft Educator Center, you need to do that. So again, go into Google, go into Microsoft Educator Center and sign up. Then you can do this session. So this is a really basic session. So this will really set the ball rolling for you on Flipgrid. So it's called Engage and Amplify with Flipgrid, and this is where I started too. So I would love for you to go on and do it. You can tell that I'm really excited by Flipgrid. It's got many, many advantages, but this is just the start. Okay, so. Oh no, I've lost my last slide. Right, I'm going to go back to my first slide. Hang on. Sorry, guys. That's embarrassing, isn't it? Hold on. Okay, so back to my first slide. So, sorry about that. I just wanted to finish with this again. So, these are my contact details. Any questions, please get in touch with me. Please follow me on Twitter. You can see me there at Nikki Var. And finally, please do have a look at the DigiLearn sector. There's a link to the presentation there. It's really, really good tool. And it's great for the DigiLearn sector to come together and share all our best practice. Thank you for listening. That was a bit embarrassing there. I did kind of mess that up, but thanks very much for listening, everyone. And back over to Dean.
That's fine, Nikki. Thank you very much for that. And like you, I think like most educators, when we talk about Flipgrid, you can tell that there's always a lot of passion when we talk about Flipgrid. So you're not alone, I'll tell you that. But Sam and Jane and Nikki, now that I got you all together after your presentation, I got a couple of questions for all of you, because there was a lot covered. And I'm going to start with Sam. And I know, Sam, when you talked about your bots and automation, which I find very interesting. And, we work with a lot of primary and secondary schools as well. And in terms of getting started with bots, where do you think the schools should start? I think Sam's screen has gone off. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna move on to Jane. Jane, we'll move on to you, and I'll come back to Sam because I think she had issues with her. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, Jane. So I'm going to move on. Sorry about your OneNote class notebook, because I found this interesting as well, because I think we're the same minds. I used to use class notebook so much. In fact, before Teams came out, that was my go-to in my classroom. You talked a bit about using the OneNote app before going on and using it and setting it up in Teams to make things easier. I wanted to ask you a bit about that. What's the advantage of that?
No, well, it's quite the opposite. I would always say to set the class notebook up from within Teams immediately. Because if you set it up outside, you cannot import it to a team afterwards. So you'd have to set the whole thing up again. So sorry if I wasn't clear on that. Always, no. I bang, if Chris Melia is listening, who is going to be laughing because I bang on about this all the time, set it up from within Teams. because you might as well have everything in one place. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because I've worked with some educators who tried to get me to do the opposite, where they set up a main OneNote notebook and then they spit sections out to teams as they need, or team notebooks, class notebooks as needed. So I think again, I'm learning every time I talk to different educators, I learn of different ways that these are going, methods that are being used. And it's so interesting to me. The other one is the breakout rooms for your teams. And do you use that? Do you ever set up private channels as well for the teams or for breakout rooms, or is it strictly the meetings?
I decided that I think if you're going to set up lots and lots of different channels, it can start to get really confusing for everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is why I decided that I'd just have the simple meetings rather than trying to segregate out. And it makes it easier rather than having to go and find a session, within a channel. It's much easier just to be able to go to their calendar and click on it.
Excellent. For those people watching who've not used Teams and channels, if you go to our Aspire Ed courses that talk about Teams, you can get all the basics to kind of catch up to what we're talking about. But just to let you know, Teams is made up of different channels for communication. And like Jane presented, a class notebook as well, which is a OneNote notebook for those of you familiar with that. I'm going to go back to Sam real quick. Hey, Sam.
Hi, Dean.
I just wanted to ask you about the bots. So we work with a lot of primary and secondary schools as well as college and university. But specifically for them, just off the top of your head, what do you think in terms of improving learning and outcomes, kind of what Abby referred to in her talk, where do you think they should start if they are thinking of using automation with bots?
Okay, I think it's starting with the idea. So it's starting with, like I said before, about what questions do you want to prompt students with. So have that really basic framework mapped out, but then add the creative stuff, because I think to present things in the same way, you're going to lose motivation and you're going to lose engagement. And there's just such a difference between attendance and engagement, isn't there? So I think just having that shell of what the basics of what is it that you want your students to learn, but then add the creativity. So like the Sim Hospital, I imagine for schools, you could create I don't know, a sim carnival. So you could create somewhere, separate the channels into like a juggling tent, and come meet the clowns. You could have a whole fun fair created as a team, but you need that framework of what is it that you're actually teaching underneath. So that has to be your starting point before you do anything, really. But it's possible. It's so good to work with these these platforms, because they're really compatible, aren't they? Like Nikki was saying, in terms of Wakelet and Flipgrid and everything, and Jane talking about what you can actually embed as well. It's making it more and more possible to be more creative.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I would, off the top of my head, I want to create a bot for those questions, like you said, that keep getting asked again and again, like what the time schedule or the time schedule is, and also where can I find this letter and this information. I would love to have that, because students as well, no matter the age, you're going to get those questions that are going to come fast and furious and quite often, don't you? So thanks for that, Nikki. Flipgrid, as I think out of all of the great third-party apps that Microsoft has, that's probably one of the most popular, and it's one that most teachers are starting to get on board with, especially right now. Have you seen it from, I guess, when you first started using it to the current time? Has it helped foster more relationships in your classes, or with you and your students, or how does that work?
Absolutely. And I think I picked up on, this may not have happened had COVID not arrived, and COVID's horrific. However, the positives that have come out of it are that we're actually able to use these kind of tools now to engage and to socialize, actually. So absolutely. I feel like I know my students better, and I feel like they know each other better because of Flipgrid. I cannot tell anyone enough to get and just start using it. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, similar to Class Notebook, I used Flipgrid quite a bit in my classroom. And when it first came out, it was such a great tool. And one thing I noticed, and you might have noticed this too, that it surprisingly brings out the shyer students.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, Dean. Actually, what I found is that the more vocal students in the classroom, physically in the classroom, were less likely to would put a picture on, whereas it brought out the shy students, and they were posting like 5-minute answers, and it was wonderful, really good. Yeah, so I agree with that.
Okay, well, I'm going to start from the top now. I'm going to go Sam, Jane, and Nikki. And I've got another question quickly to go over with you. And it's basically the same question. So it's a kind of a well-being question I always ask all our presenters, especially right now. So how are things going during this COVID climate that we're in at the moment? How is it? And secondly, how has Microsoft 365 helped you to deal with the situation?
I think we're doing really well. I think because we've been using Teams for a while now, and because we're so well supported at work and externally as well. So obviously with the Microsoft community and with DigiLearn sector, you can post questions and get an answer within 24 hours to some really quite complicated and complex problems that are occurring within the teaching and learning environment. So without contributing to and communicating and asking for help from those communities, I don't think we would have surfed what we've had to surf over the past since COVID started. So I think it's just that acknowledgement that you need to ask for help. At the moment, we all need to ask for help. We're all digitally upskilling, but we all need to be honest and just say it how it is. And I think that's what I really respect about these communities and these online communities. You can just ask those questions. It's just building up your confidence and awareness to understanding that we're all in the same boat, and we are all trying to problem solve these things, but there is a way forward. So I love these communities. I've got to say, I absolutely love, because everyone is just so helpful, and it's just you can just be so creative. It's brilliant. So
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are going to talk later about how to join that community. But Jane, same question. How's everything going, and how was your university's use of Microsoft help with that?
Yeah, I think it's going amazingly well, considering that everybody was really thrown into it. You know, really, it was just like, okay, there you go, now. And it's like, so really very, very little notice. But I think, you know, what we've been able to do, I think I'm going to echo something that Nikki said. This has really been an opportunity to develop and change things and to think about things in a whole new way. And because Microsoft have all this stuff and it all works together, you know, you can do virtually anything. I mean, what I've done, you know, I've kept it really pretty simple, what I actually do with the students, but the technology that's behind it to enable it to look that simple is just remarkable. And yes, that having those communities that where you can just go and ask for help is just fabulous, just fabulous.
Oh, that's great.
That's me.
What about you? Same question.
So like I said in my presentation, pre-COVID, I wasn't particularly great on technology. But actually, through DigiLearn, which is where I kind of started, I'm now a DigiLearn champion and an MIE expert. So it's kind of given me the opportunity to really progress my DigiLearn journey. And Jane and Sam, who I think both looked at my portfolio, Digi Champion and Digi Advocate, have been astounding and so helpful. Chris Melia, who looks after the DigiLearn sector, amazing. And the, you know, the Microsoft community, the DigiLearn community, like Sam was saying, you can ask anything and they're there like that with an answer, and that's just so powerful. So I'm okay, thanks.
That's great. Well, I know I met Chris a while back pre-COVID at a Microsoft event in Manchester, and I was really impressed with what was going on at the university. Yeah. And as soon as everything happened, even when I knew you guys were going to come and present today, I said they're probably going to be fine because of all the things that I knew that were in place before COVID was here. So that was one of the advantages. Now we're seeing there's a lot of schools at all levels that really need to, I guess, kind of catch up in a short amount of time. But it is doable as long as we figure out that first step. And you guys definitely have got that. So I just want to thank you. And I just want to remind everybody again, before we say goodbye to our presenters, that you too can be a part of that community. We're going to talk about how, watching today's webinar, you'll be able to become a Microsoft Innovative Educator. We're going to give you a code later on to redeem at the MEC, the Microsoft Educator Center, the same one that I think Nikki showed there, and Flipgrid Certified Educator Level 1, if you want to do that as well afterwards. But I want to thank all of you again. Sam, thank Abby for me as well. Jane, thank you. And Nikki, have a great day, and thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
And I am going to stick around because I've got a few more things to share with you, along with your Microsoft Innovative Educator code at the end. Well, as we move on, I'm going to bring up my hybrid learning slide, because one of the things that I think we've seen after talking to our presenters today is that need in the current climate calls for new ways to adapt to reaching our students at home and in the classroom. So that need for blended learning has never been higher, but on top of that, we have to evolve even more sometimes, because we're not always going to be in the classroom or be able to extend it in a way that we need it to. So Microsoft has the tools to help you start that journey, as well as create a true hybrid learning experience. So face-to-face is what we're used to as educators, and virtually. But we have Microsoft 365 tools to help facilitate class, as well as the materials you need, discussions, and assignments. So one of the things that'll never change is educators making it personalized, make the information engaging, and making it relevant. But the new realities are that we need to add some other elements to this, which is the synchronous and asynchronous learning, which just means that students can access this information whether we're together in real time or not. And that includes using Teams as well as when they are in the classroom as well. So we'd like to develop that full picture of what's possible. So let's break it down here and take a look at our traditional learning structure so we can see how that looks. And again, that first step starts with acknowledging that we have to be together in the traditional classroom face-to-face, and that is that synchronous learning. We're all together. We're still in a brick building there together, and the classroom learning is at the same time. And of course, the interventions there as needed by the teacher are acted upon, and that personalized learning engagement, as we talked about, making it very relevant, is there. And this has served us so well, and is still needed because these skills will not go away. They actually carry over once we introduce that asynchronous learning. Now, some schools in the past have used this, and this is blended learning, when you're able to learn together as a class, even as groups, okay, and a differentiation, but also the students have the ability to access either the work or the lessons or both away from the classroom, away from the actual school building. And that is the beginning of blended learning. In fact, you hear a lot of terms associated with it, such as flipping the classroom, where students even have access to the lessons before the lessons are introduced in the classroom. And again, that is probably one of the most engaging ways of using blended learning in the classroom. So now we also have one more element, the virtual classroom. Okay, so that includes that face-to-face element, but it can also include access to a recorded lesson that not all students can either be a part of, or maybe it's at a different pace depending on differentiation. So this allows for Microsoft Teams to fill that void. So with Microsoft Teams, we can teach those lessons, and we can either talk to the students at the same time, and those that can't be there can join in and watch the recording at their own time. As I think you mentioned, or you listened to Jane Fitzgerald earlier talk about how that works in her lessons. But it is very, very common now, and that is one element of hybrid learning that makes it so powerful. Not only do the students have the ability to access that class notebook and also the channels within Teams to make sure they're up to date on communication, depending on the different subjects or topics in a class, but they can access it whenever they want, either through the phone or the laptop. And then when they're back in class, they can get clarification and even more information from their teachers. So that is hybrid learning, an overview. But what are these digital skills that we discussed today, and why are they needed so much in the 21st century? Well, if we identify some of the skills that were covered today and through all the presentations, I think we could see that all of these were covered. Collaboration, definitely. Class notebook, Flipgrid, Teams, it is there, and it is really a core skill needed to become successful using it. Creativity, there is the outlet there for all students to show their creativity, whether they're turning in work or collaborating at the same time, such as in the collaboration space in Class Notebook, or whether it's in Flipgrid when they're returning their video feedback. Then that also leads into skilled communication, getting that point across, knowing what the objective is, knowing what the rubrics are, and then giving that feedback or communicating what your purpose is. And then there's innovation. I think we could see with all the educator presenters today that there was definitely innovation on their part, but on the students' end, it gives them those means to show what they can do and how they can use topics and also the information given to them to come up with new creative outlets. And handling information, specifically in Wales and part of the DCF for primary, secondary schools, we know data handling is a big issue. That is something that is very easily tackled with Microsoft 365 apps, from Excel spreadsheets, the basics, all the way to collaborating within your class notebooks and teams. It is very easy to do, as well as the built-in coding elements within Minecraft Education Edition. Real-world problem solving. I think that all of the presentations today, we saw how the Microsoft tools were used to present real-world problems to the students, and then they were able to use that information and show how they would go about solving those problems. And then finally, harnessing and sharing that knowledge. So again, we can see Teams as that all-in-one hub where we can share all the information needed and sharing that knowledge. But at the same time, it's a hub for students to show the other 21st century skills definitely needed for our future. So starting an engaged digital classroom, I think we saw pretty much all of these tools being used today. In fact, starting with Teams, that digital hub that we talked about, it brings everything together in one place. You're able to chat, review, and interact with all the content in one place. And not only that, it's a great area for even staff to use along the same lines to save on your email inbox, and also to be able to look at documents at the same time and collaborate as needed whenever you need to. And then moving on to Flipgrid, like I said before, every time we talk to an educator who's starting to use Flipgrid, whether it's their first year or whether it's their 5th year, they're always passionate and they're always excited to talk about what it's done to their class, because I can speak from a personal experience. It does transform your class and gives it that extra element, and it's really great to see. Flipgrid is very easy to get started. If you do need more help with any of these topics I'm about to cover, go to Aspire Ed, which I'm going to talk about in just a bit, our Aspire to Be learning platform, which is actually blended learning. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a bit. But yeah, Flipgrid is great. And I think one of the things that we didn't touch on, but it connects with Microsoft Teams seamlessly. I think Nick actually talked about sharing within Microsoft Teams, but placing that grid and making the topics available to students whenever needed, it just gives that extra element of collaboration, and that relationships become strengthened throughout. And then looking up at the top right here, we have PowerPoint. Now, all of the presenters that use PowerPoint, and you saw how there was embedded videos, you saw that they were using live captioning as well. Even now we're using that. It really adds an extra element, and there's so much to do in PowerPoint that it's not utilized all the time. So it's definitely one of those X factor tools that definitely every teacher should have. And then lastly, OneNote, which is probably the way to organize, one of the best ways to organize not only your lessons, but also, as you saw with Jane when she presented, but how it also will help you organize collaborative areas for your students. And then on top of that, you also have access to your students' notebooks. So you can see what they're doing. You'll have the ability to send information to them directly, either as a class or differentiated individuals or small groups as needed. And it connects directly with Teams, and you can create assignments directly from class notebook sections. And that's something we'll touch on in another webinar series. But if you haven't used Teams and Class Notebook, again, I'll refer you to our Aspire Ed website, which we'll talk about in just a bit, and the courses we have available to all educators. Well, I want to go ahead and give out our MIE code now before we get moving on and wrapping up later on. But this is your code to become a Microsoft Innovative Educator. The code is there at the bottom. This will be recorded and be sent out, so just in case you miss it, don't worry. I want to go over how to redeem this achievement code. So when you go to education.microsoft.com, you're going to come upon the Microsoft Educator Center, and you'll be prompted to either create an account or log in if you've already made one. If you haven't created an account before, you can use your work Office 365 account. If you're in Wales, you can use your Hub account, or you can use the Microsoft option when signing up, and use a personal Outlook or Hotmail account. So once you have created an account, at the top right of the web page, You will see your initials once you're logged in successfully. And when you left click on your initials, you'll see from the drop-down menu the option to redeem achievement code. And then you'll use the code that we've given you, put it in the box, make sure you include the T in the dash, and redeem it. And once you've done that, you will be able to access not only your badge, but also an actual certificate for your CPD file. If you've never been to the Microsoft Educator Center, it's really, really great. It provides educators access to free professional development whenever it's needed. So you can find it for lesson plans as well. Teachers will share individual lesson plans or ideas for using certain apps, as well as STEM and digital skills. And it's also a great place to begin your journey with Microsoft Innovative Educator programs such as Flipgrid, as you saw from Nikki's presentation. There's a lot of resources there for even families. So if you take a look, there's so much to do. In terms of the navigation, it's quite easy as well. So setting up your account today, once you finish the webinar and once you get the information, you'll be able to redeem the points, get your badges, and we'll keep a transcript of all the courses you've taken, and all of the information that you've learned will be accessible at any time. So what's next? Well, if you've attended our Feel the Classroom webinar, we're really going to encourage you to sign up for our Inspiration Day events coming up. They're going to be hands-on sessions where you'll be able to use these tools such as Microsoft Teams, Class Notebook, and Flipgrid. So if you haven't done it, go back to the registration page that you used to sign up for today's webinar and sign up for the Inspiration Days. There's one on the 24th and 25th this month, with more to come after half term, and we'll keep you updated about that. Also, for attending today, we will be sending you a 50% off code for all Microsoft EDU courses on our Aspire Ed website. And I'm going to talk a bit about Aspire Ed as we move towards our closing today and talk about what exactly it is and why it's so needed now more than ever. You know, all of the topics covered today, Microsoft Teams, Class Notebook, and also Flipgrid, are courses that you can take on Aspire Ed to get you started. And just like the Microsoft Educator Center, we will give you a badge for your CPD file. As well, you get to look at the feedback from real teachers who have taken these courses. And these lead to your schools and also individual digital empowerment, and really helps you embed technology. And much like Sam said in the first presentation today, we put at the core of it, how is this going to improve learning in your classroom? Because all of these videos and all the courses on Aspire Ed were developed by educators, and they're for educators. All courses were created by people with vast amounts of experiences, all the way from ex-head teachers, all the way to our ALN experts. The value is cost effective, and they're accessible anytime and anywhere. The targeted content is just that. It highlights the right tools that actually work. And we really pride ourselves on making sure you have something practical to take away. The wide appeal that's relevant to every educator in every phase of education. We had presenters today from the university level. However, we have courses that go all the way down to Key Stage 1 and earlier. The pedagogically focused courses in Aspire Ed reflect the real world of teaching and learning. Digital portfolio, just like we mentioned earlier, the digital badges will help you build that profile you need to show your progress. And evidencing for schools. If you buy a whole school subscription to Aspire Ed, you're able to track and monitor progress. And you can build that into performance management. In fact, once you get that whole school subscription, you have the option to even ask Aspire Ed how to take that even further to include it in your school's improvement plan. It's future-proof, so the courses in the library will continue to expand. Existing courses will be updated to reflect new changes. In fact, there's lots of new changes coming very soon to Aspire Ed with some new courses. The expertise, the opportunities to book strategy and support calls with A to B learning technologists, such as myself and also the whole team back in SA1 in Swansea. So if you haven't looked at Aspire Ed, I really encourage you. I just want to show you the URL link one more time. It's www.aspireed.com. aspired.online. And don't forget, we're going to send you a 50% off code directly after the webinar in just a moment. So please hold on to that and use it. And the courses are already pretty cheap as it is. So with that code, it's going to be really great. So one of the ways you can keep up with what's going on with Microsoft and the community is to get on social media. And as the presenters mentioned today, when you are part of the Microsoft Educator community, it is quite special, and it's a place where you can ask questions and you can get help almost instantly. There's always someone waiting to give you some advice if you need any further information. So to join that community, to get access to resources and training, go on Twitter as well and look for MS Education UK, Facebook, Microsoft UK Education, and YouTube, Microsoft EDU, for all of these wonderful access to best practice. If you have any questions about anything particularly to do with Microsoft, feel free to email them, educommunityuk@microsoft.com. If you have any questions about the webinar, what we can do to help your school or help you individually, feel free to email us at info@aspirettobe.eu, along with my info at the beginning of the webinar. You can contact us anytime if you have any questions about anything or want more information. Now, the last thing I'm going to cover before we get going is the feedback form. I am going to send everybody who is watching today a feedback form. And I'm just giving a preview here just because there are quite a few things to fill out. It's not going to take very long. But one of the things that you're going to be able to get when you turn in your feedback form is a chance to take your Microsoft Certified Educator exam for free. Okay, so if you turn in your feedback form, we'll put you in the drawing for that. And even if you're not ready to take that exam, okay, it won't expire right away. So you'll be able to hang on to it. And that's over a £90 value. So it's really something to hold on to. When you are ready, feel free to take your exam. And if you have questions on that, feel free to contact us. But you'll be getting this exact feedback form. You just need your name, email address, and also your school. And then we'll just see how we did, and anything that you can give us to make future webinars even better. We definitely would like your feedback on that. But just a reminder, when you do turn that in, we will be entered to get a Microsoft Certified Educator exam voucher for free. All right, before we go today, I just wanted to cover the topics that we talked about earlier, and just remind you that if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. So I want to thank Sabby Pywell and Abby Jones for their first talk about using bots in Microsoft Teams. I found that very interesting. If you have any questions that you would like us to pass on, or if you want to get in contact with Sam and Abby directly, refer to the first few slides that we had this morning, and we put their Twitter tags on there. They'd love to hear from you. And then Jane Fitzgerald, who talked about Class Notebook and using it for collaboration and also for breakout rooms, which was an amazing presentation. Again, Jane's Twitter tag and handle are listed in the first, I think it's the second, third or fourth slide, okay, in the presentation today. And then also Nikki Varley, who talked about Flipgrid. Again, one of those tools that makes every teacher feel very excited about the potential. And also once you've used it, you get excited because you get to see what happens to your class. So Nikki is, and her Twitter handle are there as well. So feel free to reach out to them. Or again, if you have any questions about those topics, or you have any questions about the Aspire Ed video courses on those topics that we have available, feel free to reach out anytime. I want to thank all of our presenters one more time. Also, Nick Evans, our learning technologist in the background, helping produce the show today. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Please register if you haven't already for our Inspiration Days coming up on the 24th and 25th. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.